Hi Aaron, and welcome to your session here at Swim Therapy on Wednesday the 2nd of November 2011. We're going to begin today by working on your front crawl for the purposes of your triathlon. This was your opening swim from the 4 camera angle view to begin with. And a good front crawl, the first and only priority is to try and reduce drag. The drag coefficient in the human body is bad enough as it is. Before we start worrying about creating propulsion, we've got to reduce that resistance. So first of all, we've got to keep the body as horizontal as possible in the water. So on the hips behind the shoulders, we want the legs behind the hips wherever possible in the water. At the moment, I think the danger of burying the head as low as this to try and get your hips up is that you're going to make breathing very difficult and you're going to create a lot more frontal resistance with the top of your head. So just got to be careful that, yes, we do want the hips and legs high, but we've got to do that without just shoving your head down. You've got to keep your chest low, you've got to have good core control to keep the lower back from hyperextending, and we need to have a much smaller flutter kick at the back of the stroke. At the moment we're seeing a lot of crossing of the legs, a lot of scissor kicking, and because the toes seem to spend more time pointing at the bottom of the pool than the back wall, you don't create a lot of lift with your kick. If we could point those toes better, drive a little bit more water downwards, not only would the water that's running under your chest run off the bottom of your leg instead of into the top of your foot, but also you get a lot more propulsion from it as well. The kick is a real weapon in a good front crawl. Even in tri, we need a constant flutter kick to maintain our body position, and a wetsuit can't do that on its own. The other thing we need if we're going to reduce resistance is good body rotation. So if you imagine a central axis that's running straight through the middle of your head all the way through your body and out through your toes, your head has to remain totally still at all times in order to preserve your balance, but your shoulders, hips and legs should all be rotating longitudinally around that. And at times, I think, particularly on the breathing strokes, we get some good rotation through the hips and legs on this side. Just be careful we don't overcook it. If you get too far around, you're going to make yourself less buoyant and it gets too difficult to control. Obviously, it's very important that we roll evenly, and that's why coaches will often encourage bilateral breathing, is to ensure that we develop the core as evenly on one side as we do on the other. It doesn't exclusively mean that we have to breathe every 3, it just means there are occasions where we may need to breathe every 2 on one side and then switch to the other. My concern with the breath to the right is that at times I think the head is pulled too far out of centre. The centre line should be running through your ear, it's probably now running through the back of your head. And also you seem to take an age to get the head back to the centre line. You end up sort of looking over to your left here rather than bringing the head straight back to the centre. And as a result, the body's gone from the middle of the pool and followed the head over to that left hand side. And that lack of balance was dramatically affecting the distance that you're having to swim. So really important that we control the head. The other issue for me is what the arms are doing at that point. The arms can cause as much imbalance in the stroke as the head can. And I think one of the issues that you've got with your front crawl is that you've got a very, very hand-led recovery. The hand lifting out the water at the same time as the upper arms. There's a lot of resistance. The hand is a long way away from the body rather than underneath the elbow, and you've now got to correct for that swinging momentum. You can see on this particular occasion you've entered far too wide. On other occasions you enter way too far across on the centre line. On other occasions you probably hit the line of your shoulder on the entry, but because you've gone in so early you then push it across again, and that kind of stretching over the body like that is going to put you mechanically in a very weak position. You've now got to sweep the hand all the way back out in order to get it in the right position. So incredibly important that yes, we do need rotation in order to get reach, we do need to extend, we do need to stretch forwards, but it needs to be in the correct position. Once we have got into that rotated shape, the hips and the legs are high, we're on an angle, we're now looking to try and present the biggest paddle possible, if I can get my words out, towards your feet. And the surface area we're trying to use here is your elbow to your fingertips, so the forearm as well as the hand should be involved as early as possible in the propulsive phase of the stroke. At the moment though, that's very difficult for you to achieve because your hand sweeps out too wide, the hand drops too low during the catch, and your forearm is pushing far too much water downwards. And the reason for that is the brain has decided to disengage the shoulder so we don't have to use particularly the lats and the deltoids and the tricep as heavily. What we've got to try and do is engage that rotator cuff so the elbow can bend and face upwards, and then when you do try and accelerate the hand, it will travel underneath the elbow, not backwards with the elbow, because at the moment we can see that paddle is not involved in the propulsive phase at all. Okay, the hand is facing backwards, but the forearm still isn't vertical. Not until it gets right to the back of the stroke here would you say that the wrist is underneath the elbow during that drive phase. Left hand side is marginally better in that we can see here that after an initial push down from the surface, we do engage the rotator cuff, we do start to get a little bit of bend through the elbow, but the elbow collapses backwards long before the hand is underneath it, so you're still not particularly presenting that paddle greatly on that side either. So incredibly important that we get the correct mechanics with the arms. I think the other thing that was having a massive impact on the position of the body at times was the breathing. You can see that with both goggles above the surface and with virtually right here above the bow wave as well, it's going to make it very difficult for you to keep the correct position in the water at that point, and breathing can be such a disruption. And that's what we were working on these first couple of sets. It was trying to get you to keep the water line closer to your forehead. If you put your head too far down, as we said, it's very, very difficult to find that trough in the water. Whereas this time we can see that with the head in a better position, you're able to locate that space much easier. You see that bow wave nestling on the front of the forehead. We're then looking to turn, keep that bottom goggle in, and we can see by keeping the head a little bit lower during the breathing action, the water level is much higher at the front of the head than it is by the side of the head here. So you're starting to find that trough, and ideally that bottom goggle should stay underneath the surface at all times. And if you're going to achieve that, you're going to make it far easier to keep your hips up in a level position. That's a really poor one again. Look, whole of your head out, and unfortunately the brain wants to choose the easiest path at all times. It's so worried about you drowning, it's always going to lift higher than we're all comfortable with. That's a cracking breath there. You can only see that top goggle out of the water, and see that you're breathing through the corner of your mouth. Good breath, and then tucking that head back in. So the mouth is really hidden in that bow wave, and that's something that you've got to continue to work on with your front crawl. You only ever want to see that one goggle above the surface. Next few sets we're starting to focus on the arms a lot more. We said that in a lot of these early sets we weren't really doing the zip drill properly. We weren't getting the hand to run up the side of the body. As soon as we did that, that engaged the shoulder, we pushed the elbow a lot higher. So the elbow should reach the perpendicular before the hand. As the hand starts to extend, we know that your elbow wants to drop and your hand wants to swing across the centre line. So in order to correct for that, we were trying to get you to aim for about 11 and 1 o'clock on the clock face. You can see on this first stroke that we haven't achieved that. We've still gone too far across the body. Next stroke on the right hand side, much better high elbow position, good rotation through the shoulders and leading arm. We know the hand wants to come in, so aim out to compensate. Again, still too far in. So what will dawn on you when you watch these clips back is that how wide it felt in your mind and yet how far across you still are in reality. So when your brain is telling you your hand is in one position, it's usually once you've sweeped it back out. Take this stroke for example. Entry, about shoulder width. Drop the elbow, pushing it too far across. You then sweep the hand back out, so the feedback you're getting from your brain is you're wide, you're in line with the shoulder. Not on the entry you weren't. The good thing was that hand's not slipping anywhere near as far out during the propulsive phase as we saw in that previous set, so the balance was certainly improving. But you've really got to ensure that hand is in the correct position, and there's far too many times where that hand is a long way inside of the elbow. And it wasn't until you really went for it and really took it to town that we saw a different entry. And this was probably one of your best sets. You really maintain that width a lot better. The danger is when you're putting your hand in wider is that you'll follow the hand with your head. So as your hand is aiming wider here, the head will then lean over on the shoulder. Because it's a stronger position, the brain's not used to the pressure and load that puts on the deltoid and on your lats. So it will then use the weight of the head to compensate. So we can see the head leaning towards the hand. Absolutely not. We've got to reach forwards wide, but we've got to keep that head on the centre line. So it just felt at times the head was starting to lean, and that in itself caused a lot of imbalance. So incredibly important that when you are aiming wider that the head remains totally independent of that. But it was a good effort. I also think the breathing every 3 really helped. By not just sticking to your one favoured side, it meant that that big push out wide with the hand that we can see here was only happening once every 6 strokes instead of once every time on the right hand side, because you're then able to get your head back in the water, watch the hand, make sure that it wasn't slipping so wide on the non-breathing strokes, still pushing it too far out because again you breathed on that side. But when you did have your head down, you made things a lot easier. As soon as you resorted back to the easy option, it got a lot worse. But as we went through these final couple of sets, we were starting to talk about how important that is when it relates to the catch, because if the hand isn't underneath the elbow when you start the propulsive phase, you're going to have to correct for that later on. And this at the moment is a step too far for you today. We did see a couple of examples on the left hand side where you did engage the shoulder better and you did present the paddle better. Take this stroke for example. See a much better shrug of the shoulder towards the ear. You can see the upper arm is a lot more stable, the elbow closer to the surface, and the forearm better presented. And that's not something that's just going to go click when you've already got breathing and the entry point in your mind. So you've got to take it one step at a time. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're going to have to be patient. focus on your priorities. You know, the catch, as we said before, is the icing on the cake, and it's something that will need at least one more session to introduce to you. It's not something you can have a quick look at in 5 minutes. It is mechanically one of the most difficult things to achieve in a good front crawl. So we're good to see you back here in 6 to 8 weeks when you've had a good chance to ingrain that muscle memory, to pick up where we've left off and continue to develop that further. But very well done today. If you have any questions at all on anything that we've mentioned on the CD, don't hesitate to give us a call or an email here at Swim Therapy, and we'll happily walk you back through that.